Regardless of your political beliefs, I think we can all agree that the recent presidential election marked an enormous shift in political power. On January 20th, the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives will all be controlled by one party. And from what we can tell, we're poised to see seismic shifts in policy.
Political scientists and historians and observers are all going to debate whether there's a paradigm shift. One of the things people will be talking about is there a new Republican Party? Is there a Trump party? Is there a Ryan party? What's the future of the Republican Party? To what extent are the Trump voters just Trump voters? Or are they a new base for the Republican Party? Similarly, on the Democratic side, you're going to hear, did Bernie win the election? Is the future of the Democratic Party the Sanders Party? How will the Democratic Party grow in order to be competitive, more competitive on the national level? And maybe it's time we stop talking about the presidency and look at how competitive or not competitive the Democratic Party is at the local and state level. I mean, one might argue that the Democratic Party has been putting all of its chips on the presidency and not really focusing at being competitive at various levels. Those are all institutional, structural, fabulously important questions. But there's also the personality of the person who just became president.
The top story was Donald Trump talking about how there were 2 million illegal votes. And that was the top story. And it had totally bumped this other story, really important story, way down the page. So, I mean, it's going to be good for journalism. The New York Times now has, the circulation of the New York Times goes up every day by 10,000. And that's the digital circulation, and this is great news for the
He is tweeting late into the night and into the morning. New York One, if you follow New York One, has a tweet tracker every morning, hour by hour. How many tweets did Donald Trump send? And I think it ends at 6 o'clock in the morning because they assume people will get up at that point and are supposed to be tweeting, but not before that. But they are tracking his tweets, and it's amazing to me that a president is going to tweet his thoughts consistently throughout the night. And if you consider how he made the comment about Boeing, tweets about it, and they lose $2 a share in value. I mean, that's amazing.
Well, it picked back up.
And it shows the power of the presidency, right? And when the president speaks, policy is made.
What is the relationship journalists are going to have with the Donald Trump administration? I jokingly said, who is he going to put in that press room? Who will be his press secretary? And someone said, what makes you think that there's going to be a press room? What makes you think there will be that interaction? And I think it's going to be very challenging for news outlets to have a relationship with the White House and really get the stories, because one of the main complaints I heard from a lot of journalists this cycle was the amount of lying that actually happened. Normally, people like Basil and I, we'll say we won't tell you something, or we'll be pretty straight up about it. But the amount of outright lying from the campaigns and among other people really skewed, and I think even historically will show, a really big problem as to how people find out what's really happening in this country.
Look at the Taiwan phone call.
Right.
You want an example of the kind of history we are going to face? If you remember it, the Taiwan phone call was a phone call that was presented to us as if it had been either a gaffe by President-elect Trump or just one of those things he shot from the hip. It turns out this was an intentional act that had been planned with the help of former candidate Bob Dole. So the Trump transition didn't even present the first foreign policy initiative of the president-elect honestly.
We've never had a president that we've really known so little about and know him to be so unpredictable. While he was in everyone's living rooms for 10 years on The Apprentice, his policies, he's shifted on almost every one of them. We don't know where he really stands, and he's been so unpredictable. That's what makes other people uncomfortable.
Trump didn't do anything that was that different. It was about his personality. It was about, and the basics still matter, a clear, concise message. Make America great again. Simple. Whatever you think that to mean, make America great again. Clear and concise. I don't agree with the outcome. I don't agree with his view of a great America. But for those that supported him, it was a clear, concise message. And for him to just get up and by the sheer power of his personality, by his ability to throw everyone off, he made this election, he made his supporters forget about party, focus more on him. And that is a trend, and to the point where, oddly enough, I've had 4 people come to me, writers, and say, maybe Oprah should run.
And that's really also the big question where that uncertainty comes from, because he's never governed. And I don't know if he knows the vast, I think when he met with President Obama, he really was, his breath was taken away about the vast responsibilities that are there. You can see it. And now there's a job to be done. And everyone's wondering, what does that mean? Whether you're from New York or Ohio, it all affects you differently because government has to work for you.
And so the Democrats have to start being smarter about getting in 2018 and 2020. And to young people who say, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I say, start finding a way for a good Democrat to win a legislative seat in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Texas, and that would be a way to move forward.
I mean, these maps really matter.
That's right.
Look at there are a number of states that Hillary Clinton won where there are more Republican congressmen coming from that state. Virginia, I think, is one of them.
Right.
So, and how is that possible in a so-called blue state? Because of the way that the districts have been
Well, let's
designed.
not forget, we are where we are as a country right now because of the 2010 redistricting maps.
That's right.
Those were the last maps that had blue dog Democrats and moderate Republicans. And those were the folks that made the deals with both sides of the aisle. I believe you need to experience both of them to be successful. Basil and I, for example, have both worked in government. I've done 3 tours in government and gone in and out because I believe in public service. And I think it's made me better in my political role as a result.
If you look at the picks thus far for his cabinet, and we may disagree in terms of, well, we may think that some picks are more conservative, more hawkish, whatever the case is. But for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, he gets someone who has no experience dealing with housing or urban development. So you mean to tell me that
Or managing it.
Management.
So you mean to tell me that the person that you put in charge of programs for the poor, programs that have civil rights mandates, you put in charge a person with no experience in those areas, except that he's African American and allegedly lived in public housing, but we found out he didn't.
Any issue that's out there in the press and respond in some shape or form. And that, to me, is what's maybe an opportunity now for people who may not have normally have had their voice heard or responded to. Donald Trump will respond.
To take something you usually hear in the subway or at airports, if you see something, say something. If the vulnerable in our society are mistreated, say something, tweet about it, talk about it. That's the way, in this environment, that's the way to protect our civil liberties. This is a stress test for our democracy.
Right.
And if you are optimistic about who you are and in your country, this is the time to prove it. And I'm one of those who's optimistic that we're going to pass our stress test. But it is a stress test. See something, say something.
Well, you know, there's a huge protest being planned for the day after the inauguration. It's going to be in Washington. It's going to be in New York City. It's going to be in Chicago, all over the country. And I think then we will really see what kind of response, you have on the ground, and whether Trump will respond to that.
Organization will be key.
That's right.
That is, there's a date plan, there's a message planned. That's something that gets a response in the positive way.
As a party leader, I have to say, you still got to go vote. Half the country did not vote. With everything that we've been hearing over the last 18 months, half of the voters in this country did not vote.
So that's the seismic shift, is no one knows what to expect. You knew when President Obama came in with a Senate and with a Congress and with a strong mandate, we pretty much knew he was a US Senator, he was going to conduct, as he did during the campaign, in a very fundamental way. And that's what we're used to from our presidents, a very orderly manner. And this president, we just don't know. And I think that's what has everyone so kind of up in the air, whether it's his supporters or his detractors.
That if you have these people that do not know what they're doing, and they're taking over all the top jobs in the government, the people who are going to really count are those people underneath them that really know what they're doing.
We used to have a problem with an uninformed electorate in many ways, but now we have a misinformed electorate.
If good people in government and good people outside of government that push government to its limits, if those good people come together and talk about real policy, because we really never talked about that in this campaign cycle.
Not even a little.
Really talked about policy. If good people can come together and talk about good policy, then I think I think we can do that kind of organizing around that. I actually don't like term limits because I think they're small d undemocratic. What I do like is better campaign financing.
I don't like term limits, and I'll tell you this. I think one of the most pernicious myths that we've spread in the last 30 years is that you don't need a special skill set to be good in government. We've made it appear that anybody can do a better job than the person who's been there for 10 years. That being there for 10 years means you're a loser, that you can't do anything else.
There are a lot of journalists who are really concerned about Trump's view of the First Amendment, and
He lied. He said he was in for the night and then went out.
well, his press people. That's what
Okay,
his press
his
people
press
told
people
the press people. If he undoes it, there's going to be a lot of concern among journalists. It's one of the things we're really worried about.
No, I just think I don't think he really understands the role of public interest in public administration. I don't think he gets that.
It is going to be a struggle for both parties. There's a reckoning for both parties, frankly, after this election cycle. But it didn't just start at this cycle. We saw this trend before Obama in 2008. You had a lot of young people registering as independents because the parties didn't have the brand to bring them in.
So I'm hoping for another kind of Obama to come out of the woodwork to get everybody excited again.
I'm hoping that people get excited again without another Obama and without another charismatic leader, because I don't think that's sustainable. I think people need to care because they care about their country, they care about their friends. That's why I said, see something, say something. I think this is it's going to be tough, but it's a great time to be young and politically aware. You can change the future of the country.
Whatever your age group is, that's what happens. So I think it has to hit home more. Unfortunately, you have to see the bad before you get the good.
Well, I want to thank our panel. That was great.
Thank you.
Inspiring. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. It was fun.